Greetings, YouTube. So I'm back on alignment stuff again because it bugs the crap out of me. So I was looking at a book called The Alien Bestiary, and it's for the Star Finder setting, the subcategory of the Pathfinder rules, which deals with the science fantasy version of Pathfinder. So they've updated it to a fusion of science fiction and fantasy, doing an excellent job in the Starfinder rules of having fantasy, having science fiction, and having fully functional hybrid aspects in the setting that are a fusion of both. Very well done. And I've never liked the idea in any setting of racial alignments. So this race of creatures is known as the Pelkrev, P-E-L-K-R-E-V. And they are chaotic, evil, medium, monstrous humanoids. Now, first of all, the idea of a chaotic, evil culture to me is very ironic, because you couldn't really have much of a culture that's chaotic evil. Chaotic evil is the ultimate, absolute distillation of selfishness. The selfishness taken to the point where you will do anything for your own personal agenda. You will do anything. And really, the only way to have a culture of any variety is to have one on a very small scale, essentially as much control as one warlord or warlordess can exert on those in their immediate surrounding. Because as soon as a group breaks off and takes off, if they are not stopped, they're a new group doing their own selfish thing. And it's no way to have a functioning planet-spanning culture, or even one that functions on a national level. How do you have a national level group of people who are that self-centered? Yeah, I never bought that one. It was great for warlords and raiding parties, but really, you want anything higher level than that, you have to start having functional hierarchical structures. And chaotic evil people are really bad at hierarchical structures. But the background of the Pelkrev is that they were a species of half-dragons. And you had red half-dragon Pelkrevs and blue half-dragon Pelkrevs. Okay, I don't know particularly why this one planet ended up with blues and reds and nothing else, but they did. And as opposed to player characters who play half-dragons, which has been around for a dog's age in a D&D background, I believe still exists in Pathfinder, playing a half-dragon. The idea of playing a half-giant or half-dragon or whatever is not new, and there's lots of different versions of that in all kinds of fantasy settings. But player characters can be any alignment they want to. You want to play a tiefling who has the background that their grandfather was a demon, you can, but you can also be lawful good. The game accepts that just because you are biologically linked to a species that may be extraplanar and is evil, or is traditionally evil in the case of certain types of dragons, that you yourself have moral agency and autonomy, and you can make your own moral choices. Unless, of course, you're a race in the setting that exists in any fantasy world, or most even science fiction settings, when suddenly your entire species is evil. But okay, we're going to take the Pelkrevs. They're two species, two lines in the same species on this planet, reds and blues, and a cataclysm happens with their sun. It goes massive solar flare kind of thing, and it scours the planet, and it drives most of the members of their species insane because of some kind of weird optical overload. And because of this, most of the Pelkrevs turn into the people from 28 Days Later, and they just start ripping their entire society apart. The ones that are not immediately affected by this gather themselves together and head underground to be safe. But the world is now heavily irradiated, and radiation is a thing in Starfinder, which makes sense. It is a science fantasy. Because of this, it instigates a process of rapid mutations. I'm sure most of the mutations were of the still dying at stillbirth variety, or tumor kills you 4 months from now kind of thing. But because it is a role-playing game, some of those are going to be abilities above and beyond what we have in the mortal realm. So over time, those two lines, the blacks and the blues and the reds, fuse themselves together, and you end up with this species that are purplish in tone and color, and they have some power over both electricity and heat. But in the process, because the light of this event so adversely affected people, one of the mutations that the species undergoes is they actually develop a carapace that completely covers their eyes. They are blind to what we consider visible light. Every one of the species has blind sense out to like 60 feet. But beyond 60 feet, these people literally can see nothing. Their universe has been shrunk down into that little 60-foot square, 60-foot sphere of perception. And they were driven under the earth. But it's presented here as though the cataclysm itself is kind of what drove them into evilness. And why? To my mind, that's a very prejudicial, bigoted way of looking at things. Saying those people over there who've suffered this horrible thing, they're evil for having suffered this horrible thing. And that's worse than just baking alignment into a species. Saying because that person suffered, they and all their descendants are now tainted with evil. Now, I'm sure that the author did not intend that to be the message that they conveyed from their book. I'm sure that was 100% not what they were looking to do. I don't think that there was any kind of intent on their part. Sorry, I've got the book open here on my phone. And here's the picture of what they look like. So because I know where the book is here more easily than on my hard drive. I've got like 18 gigs of gaming books on my phone, so I've never bored when it comes to wanting something to read. I'm not at home or near a paper book. I've got lots of stuff to read right here. I'm sure that was not the intent, but they turn an entire species into evil folks. And part of the implication of this is that they are survivors. Refugees of a cataclysm that befell their planet through no fault of their own. And that I find deeply dark and ugly. I don't like it. I don't like species alignments to begin with. If a species is of the mortal realm, whether they're descendants from dragons or demons or what have you, whether they themselves are mortal, they should possess agency and autonomy. They should be able to make moral decisions and be good or evil based on their actions and their deeds and their thoughts, and not on who used to be their parent. And it bugs the crap out of me that we have not gotten past that in role-playing games, that we still do that thing. We still want our cookie-cutter monolithic cultures. We still just want the cartoon cutout target that the player characters knock down. The mooks that get in the way of their experience point progression. I've been looking a lot at monster-style manuals recently, and bestiaries of one kind or another. And I love them. I find them fascinating. And I think there's a lot of really great creative work that goes into them, both in the creation of the creatures that are presented and the artwork itself. I'm a big fan of fantasy and science fiction artwork. That's well done. I follow lots of people here on DeviantArt and on Instagram who do great art, because I just love this stuff. But I'm deeply bothered by how we are so quick to accept that humans have, even in a fantasy setting, can have a dozen different backgrounds. Yet our elves are all the same, and our dwarves are all the same, and our orcs are all the same. And hell, look at these folks over here. Those orcs, they're just evil. And the Pelkrebs, they're just Evil. Interestingly, my brain said that the name of that species began with an S. Human memories are not great. I had to look quite thoroughly in this book before I found them. It bugs me, and it bugs me that there's a trope here of these folks are the survivors of a disaster, and somehow that is implied that it was part of the reason they are evil, and they are just they are just the latest targets for your player characters to knock down. Now, you want to present me with a group of people who, and it's a dog-eat-dog world. Their planet recovered, but just barely because of the cataclysm, and it's going to be millennia before it returns to the lush planet it once was. And these people are trying to survive in an environment that would destroy most folks, but they've made it. But you also would have to have some deeply altruistic connections between themselves. Because unless they cooperate, unless you work together in that kind of environment, you don't make it. And if you look at the real world situations that humans have when they're exposed to stress, almost every single time you will find the helpers and not the raiders. You will find people pulling together and helping each other. There are still those who will exploit the situation. There's still those who will price gouge and hoard and be horrible. But most people aren't. Most people will help you rather than hurt you. And I want to see that in my fantasy and my science fantasy and my science fiction settings. I don't want evil races. I don't want evil cultures. You can have cultures that have an evil aspect to them. They're militaristic, like the Romulans and something, or some of the aspects of the Klingons. But it doesn't mean the individual members are. And over time, the culture can change when it has to mature. Sure, Klingons love to charge out there and go into battle, but eventually they discover, hey, this whole thing called the Federation? They're a group of 100 plus species who every time we wanted to go do the whole going a Viking thing, they squash us like frigging bugs until we back up and we lick our wounds and we do it again. So maybe we should stop doing that? Wouldn't that be smart? So showing cultural development, even if it has been guided by the fact that the Federation keeps fly swatting them every time they try to go a Viking. So I want more depth to my settings. I want more depth to my species and ancestry of the folks that are in games. And I don't want evil species. And I don't want refugees of catastrophes being portrayed as evil because they survived something that would have killed most other peoples. Sure, these folks mutated into these creatures that don't look much like they did when they started. And yes, they are the descendants of dragons. So what? I'm Germanic. And I can remember as a kid when my classmates in the 70s found out that I had German heritage, of being given crap because of this connection between Germany and Nazis. Not because of my actions, not because I did anything, said anything that could be construed as overtly racist, or I did not endorse nor support the National Socialist Party. No, because I was German. Even though my family's been in the United States for 5 generations, and we didn't have anything to do with the German peoples during World War II. In fact, my family helped support the efforts of the United States government, and I lost a great uncle in the war in the Pacific Theater who became a hero and had a ship named after him. So, but that didn't matter. In those moments, I was just a German kid, and they could make fun of me. So it doesn't mean I understand racism in the world. Don't think I'm saying that. Being a white person in America is a gift. But it gives me an inkling of how much it sucks if you are being, thrown into that category because of something you had no control over. I had no control over the fact that my family used to be German. They came here from Germany 5 generations ago that my name is. I have no control over that. But I got shit for it because of bigotry. So I don't want that in my setting. I want the bigots to be the bad guys. I want a more progressive worldview. And if there's a group of bigots, I want them to get their comeuppance because it's a game. And I would maybe like to have the good guys win, because sometimes the good guys don't out here in our world. So let's talk about refugees and evil species and how we handle them and treat them in games. And maybe we should have a more nuanced view than is often presented to us in bestiaries.